Welcome back to Professional Wrestling, the podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hacohen, author of The Bible 3.0, Lifestyle Guidebook. You can get it now. Amazon, Indigo. You can pick it up on Audible, listen to the audiobook, Barnes & Noble. We're all over the place. We got a very special guest today. No, it's not at Chosen Ollie. We got my Shih Tzu here, and she's just hanging out and listening in because she's a giant wrestling fan. And she's been so excited because we got a really big guest. We've been pumping this up for the last couple of weeks. He's made it. He is Hamilton Pro Wrestling star, the one, the only, Van Landon. Van. Should I call you Van or Van Landon?
Van. Van works. Van's cool.
Van. It's cool. Welcome to the show. You've been watching us. You've been hearing about us. You've seen Mason Rush. Bruiser's been on. Bruiser Battersby. Vanna Black. Jax Williams. We are robbing HPW of all their stars, and now you are here with us in the flesh. Thank you so much for joining us.
So happy to be here. I mean, I told you guys sort of before all this, whenever I see a clip pop up, whenever I see the podcast, I'm hooked. I can't just scroll past that. That's content, to me, must see.
We're slowly becoming the unofficial official podcast of HPW, so it seems.
Quite literally.
Well, you can find this guy on every single social media. He's the Van Landon, right?
Exactly.
Van is in Van, Landon, Landon.
Exactly.
So first question for you is we got to meet Mr. Van today. I got a real difficult question for you. So I know you're an AEW fan.
Yes.
Huge AEW fan, which we're going to get into in a future episode. You're going to let it off the hook today. I know you followed WWE. Were you following WCW back in the day?
Okay. So here's groundbreaking news right off the hop. I'm 26 years old, so I'm relatively young in comparison to the WCW timeline. However, through the WWE network, through things like that, I have gone back and I have done my time. I have watched WCW back, and not only have I watched it back, I go on record saying 2000, 2001 WCW is some of my favorite wrestling of all time. It's crazy. It's wild. And then, of course, scale it back. You know, Starrcade 97, Sting, Hollywood, Hulk Hogan. One of my favorite matches ever, even though it's a mess. I love WCW, so even though I'm young, I do have an appreciation for all the old stuff, mainly WCW.
I love this guy. I already love this guy. I'm telling you. I have been a junkie with wrestling since I was about, 7, 8 years old. I remember on Sundays watching these shows where they had wrestling all over the world. They showed wrestling in Puerto Rico where, the distance from the ring to the fans, there was massive, empty, a football field size. And they'd always come out of the ring, and they're all over the place, watching from Mexico, Japan. So I got to ask you, because I was also a big WCW fan. Wild guess, you were a fan of a guy, Van Hammer?
Van Hammer. Oh, my goodness. You know what? The very few people at wrestling shows that come up to me and mention Van Hammer, I always give them props. Because Van Hammer is a WCW deep cut. I am a fan of him. Flock member, shout out Raven. Van Hammer was insane. I mean, you don't necessarily go back and study Van Hammer matches for work rate quality. However, Van Hammer is one of my guys.
Quote the Raven, nevermore.
Oh, yeah.
Well, being a fan of Van Hammer, as you were picking your wrestling name, I presume your birth certificate doesn't say Van London. Was he influenced in as far as you and your wrestling name and your wrestling career?
So, believe it or not, no. My name origins is a very sort of musical influence happened with my name. So, I was a big fan of this British rock band called Catfish and the Bottlemen. And they are a strange alt-rock sort of rock band, and I was obsessed with them. Their front man was named Van McCann, and he would just own the stage, had a presence to him, had a cool factor to him, and his real name was Evan, shortened to Van, and I was like, man, that's a cool guy. So in thinking of what a wrestling name should be, and when I was trying to come up with the character of, myself dialed up to 110, I was like, a front man like Van McCann has that persona. So that's where the Van came from. And then the name Landon is just one that I'm a big fan of. I've said I would name my firstborn son that name if and when I have a child. But so Van Landon, it all flowed, and we sort of did it earlier on the show, VANLANDON. I thought it all makes sense. It's easy to chant, and yeah, that's really the origins of that name.
Very often I was calling you at the beginning when I was coming to HPW, I was calling you Van London, and I still catch myself doing it sometimes. And then I realized it was Van Landon, and funny enough, before Ollie, I actually had a dog named Landon.
Awesome.
He was a schnauzer. He was awesome. And I was a big fan of Little House on the Prairie and Michael Landon. And I'm like, hey, Landon's a cool name.
It is a cool name.
There's something about it. It's like, it's got a gentleness yet a fire to it. So I'm appreciating the Van Landon.
Sweet. I love it.
And then the hair, the glasses. Again, Van Hammer or not?
So this is me. This is peeling back behind the curtain. This is Corbin behind Van. I am a long hair guy. I've had long hair my whole life growing up. The glasses, really what's inspired by that, it's a little bit of Bret Hart, of course. He had, the Hitman.
Shout out.
He would have that connection with the kids, coming out, putting the shades on them and stuff. And so to have that identifiable factor, that merchandisable sort of component to it as well. The glasses sort of tied in the whole wild energy character. And yeah, like it's true to who I am as a person. I love being in a mosh pit. I love going to rock shows and just being in some wild energy environments. That's my sort of style. And so to amplify that under the character of Van Landon is only all the more exciting.
Every time I've seen you, man, I mean, you opened up the last card on HPW. You bring out the crowd, the high energy. You're either dialed up, more dialed up, or completely dialed. There's no, with you, it's hires. You are constant energy, man. You're always on 10 Red Bulls. Were you like that growing up as a kid, or is that something that you grew into as a personality was?
This is something that's always been a part of me. Actually, growing up, I was on, the wrestling team, the football team, the rugby team. Before the games, we would have our team huddle, and I was never the captain. I wasn't that good at those sports, but the captain would come in, say his little words, and then they'd always point to me to fire up the team. And I would go in the circle, and I would be the one with the most energy. I would rile everybody up, and then we would go to war together. And that's been an energy that I've had that has carried over to HPW training, to my peers in the wrestling business. I try to bring an infectious, positive, vibe wherever I go.
I'm going to share with you a little secret, man. As you progress in the world of wrestling, promos, in-ring, vignettes will not be an issue for you whatsoever. I'm telling you, and you are a born natural. There's very few guests I've had on the show. Usually it takes them a little while to warm up. They give me a 30-second answer. They're a little quieter, and then they work up into it. But you just jump in like you've been doing this forever. So you are a natural. And one of the things in wrestling, as you know, it's about ring skill. It's the look, but it's also the mic. You know how many guys in WWE and gals, WWE, AEW, WCW back in the day, really good workers, and just you bring a mic in front of them and ask Bobby Lashley, right? So it's nice to have that combo. It's very refreshing. So, man, you bring the total package. So kudos to Van Landon.
Well, thank you.
And they call you the barn burner.
The barn burner.
I presume you did not live on a farm and lit barns. Please tell me that wasn't it.
Yes, I am no pyromaniac. I am not legitimately lighting or igniting any physical barns on fire. However, I'm a big hockey fan. The term barn burner to signify a very, rocking game inside of an arena. And in wrestling terms, signifies a rockin' match. And with Van Landon, the barn burner moniker that precedes Van Landon, that's a big sort of thing to try to own up to. But as you witness firsthand at Spring Slam 5, when I go out first, I'm ready to sort of ignite, give them something to remember. My match is going to be a barn burner experience from start to finish, 0 to 100 off the start, all gas, no brakes. And that's what the barn burner moniker really leads to.
I've read a lot of interviews with professional wrestlers over the years, especially in pay-per-views. They've always said it's way harder to have the opening match than it is to have the main event. You don't know where the crowd is at. You got to be the one getting them going. Would you agree with that?
So personally, yeah, I love the opening spot because it's, for me, it is that challenge of going out in front of a silent crowd that's about to see it. You really got to give them their first impression. And then on the other end of that, the main events, they've been there all night. You're their star attraction. It puts a whole nother pressure on your shoulders to sort of live up to the main event standard than necessarily at the opening match. I think both positions are very valuable, more valuable than really the meat and potatoes that comes in between the wrestling show, because you need to hook that audience at the start with something that's like, wow, what are we about to get into? Have everything else in there. And then, of course, a huge main event, star power, usually goes the longest too. And that's, like I said, a whole nother pressure. But I love the opening match slot.
Now, you debuted in 2019, I understood.
Yes.
And I've read online in previous interviews that you were a lifelong wrestling fan. It's not that you found this later in life. You grew up on wrestling. You've always loved wrestling. So walk us through, how do you graduate from wrestling fan to actually making, and how did you find your way to actually get trained in wrestling and then find your way to actually finally debut? A lot of people talk about it. They watch it. They wrestle with their siblings. But very few ever train in it, and very few even have the cojones to actually make it to a wrestling ring. So what was your process from young fan to debuting wrestler?
Love this question. For me, starting out as a child who is obsessed with pro wrestling, going to school on career day, what do you want to be when you're older? People saying all sorts of, standard answers, and then I'm the kid that's saying professional wrestler, and the teachers are pulling me aside to say, hey, Corbin, you got to actually try to think of something logical. And I'm there saying, who are all these people telling me I can't do this? And it was sort of a determination and a stubbornness that really put me on my path. 2016, I was very fortunate to be where I was, located up in Aurelia. There's a promotion called Barrie Wrestling. They started doing these monthly seminars where talent that they were bringing in for the shows prior to the show would just do a little wrestling lesson. It was costing me $20, and I just turned 18 at the time. So I go all in. I say, I've never stepped foot in a ring, but this is my chance. Why wouldn't I take it? Right. I start doing that, and really, I had about 2 or 3 years of bi-monthly seminar practice before I stepped foot in HPW's academy. I would do the monthly seminars, helping out at that show up at Barrie Wrestling, training with all different types of people, Josh Alexander, the Flatliners, Ben Ortmans, Tyson Dukes, all of them who would come up, pass along a little bit of knowledge, which really shaped my foundation. And once I did go to the Hamilton Pro Wrestling Academy, which was once I settled with a car to be able to travel from Aurelia to Hamilton, pretty far drive. But once I got all that set in stone, it was a no-brainer to go to the HPW Academy. I knew all about it already through social media. I knew the people that were already training there, like Corey Stone, Evan Greenaway, Mike Forte, Tyler Arrow, those names that I had seen. I remember my first day walking in there. I was like, hey guys, like, nice to meet you, in a fandom almost, because that's my first step into the reality of wrestling. I had all this foundation work, so I knew how to run the ropes. I knew how to do a headlock. I knew basic things. I knew how to bump. I knew what I was getting into. And from there, that all helped just accelerate the process for me, in terms of getting to shows, getting myself ready to start doing shows. All of this was such a perfect storm of, once again, determination and stubbornness from all the people that, tell you can't. I knew deep down I could the whole time, and it's just me proving myself right.
Tell me about the impact that Rip Impact has had on your career, the leader and the guru of Hamilton Pro Wrestling.
Rip is amazing. Rip is absolutely amazing. He is deep down one of the greatest people I have probably ever met and I have ever gotten help from, and I would say, have that mentorship role to in wrestling. He was somebody that, when I first stepped foot in the HPW Academy, recognizes your strengths, your weaknesses, and helps individuals work towards bettering and improving upon both of those things. He saw me as a high school standout amateur wrestler, worked with me on those strengths, and then again, helped me improve in all those areas that I was lacking with. And he didn't just do that for me. He does that with everyone. And truly, with what he does with the HPW shows, and how those have grown into sellout crowds, really Hamilton's best kept secret is HPW. If you're not in the building, it's hard for you to really understand the magic that happens at an HPW show. And what Rip has created, I am forever grateful, because without him, without his, obviously, training, and without his mentorship, I would never have any opportunity that I've been granted in wrestling.
If you're a wrestling fan in the Ontario region, I'm telling you, go onto Brightspace, type in Hamilton Pro Wrestling for 20 something bucks. It's the best value around, and go check out a show. It is freaking wild. We've been having sellouts, and the crowd, like the last one, the crowd was in it right from the first minute right to the end. There was no stoppage. People were right through it. The energy in that room was electric. Gotta ask you, has anybody ever mentioned to you that you kind of look a lot like Rip Impact?
I have heard that before. I have heard that, and a lot of, let's just say, other Rip students have made that comparison to me in the past. That's absolutely something that people have made comparison to me to. While I would love to have half the career that Rip Impact has had, I just take that as a total compliment.
So sitting in the crowd at the last event, I was sitting in next to my entourage, and I mentioned to them, I said, I got a storyline for you, because I'm watching the opening match and I'm saying, picture that guy up there, Van Landon. Imagine he turns out to be Rip Impact's illegitimate son, and the amount of fun we could have with that storyline.
Oh my
Could
goodness.
you run that one? I think that would work.
I would do that in a heartbeat. Rip's illegitimate son, you can tell it's illegitimate because I'm not nearly as good at lucha as Rip is. However, I think there's tons of legs with that. Have me, be the son that's either disappointing him because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. I love that idea.
And he could be the final boss, and come out during your matches. And there's a lot we could do with that. So maybe we want to run that one up the flagpole and see how he likes it, because I think that would be a ton of fun.
Absolutely.
Was there ever a world that Van Landon was a heel, or has it always been a face for you?
So actually, we're just now beginning to see the evil side of Van Landon. Yes, it's just now starting to come out. There has been a faction here in Ontario that's been dominating for quite a while, known as Empire. Matthew Grant, JT Kirk, Crystal Moon. And on one of the latest PWO, Pro Wrestling Ontario shows, Van Landon has joined forces with Ontario's most decorated faction. So stay tuned, because you never know where we may show up.
How many you get out there quite a bit. Which federations are you with currently, Van Landon?
Currently, right now, I would say the main three would be Barrie Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Ontario, HPW. However, I do and plan to this upcoming year. There's New School Wrestling NSW and Great Canadian Wrestling GCW that I plan to, and already have some dates lined up to be a part of that for.
You're going to find out on social media, because the Van Landon, and he posts it quite regularly, so you'll find out where you're wrestling. So we already know you're a big Bret Hart fan. I read that you're Owen Hart fan. So I'm going to throw, as we're ending today's episode, current WWE, current AEW, if you could have one dream matchup for yourself from each federation, who would you pick and why?
Oh, okay. That's a tremendous question as well, because it's so fun for me just thinking what I could do with people. I know somebody asked me this a while back, and so this isn't my answer, but counted as a bonus answer, was Roderick Strong. That would just be a fun one to have. But my real answer, I guess, would have to be from WWE's side. I would love to tear things up with Dominic Mysterio. I just think he's on fire right now.
You've been watching the show, you know I'm a big Dom fan.
Okay.
Dirty Dom.
And our sizes complement each other well. We would be able to have a lot of fun. Imagine going 15 to 20, him and I, just balls to the wall action. On the AEW side, that's a whole nother talent pool where it's like, do I want to be funny and wrestle Danhausen? Do I want to go crazy and wrestle Moxley? But actually, I think my dream opponent in AEW would be Orange Cassidy. Freshly squeezed Orange Cassidy. Freshly squeezed.
I was expecting you to say Kenny Omega. Wow. I was freshly squeezed.
Freshly squeezed.
Love it. I was in the crowd when he won the international belt at the time on Dynamite in Toronto. And then obviously he's lost the belt since then. But great choice. You guys would have a lot of fun wearing your Canadian tuxedos together.
We would wear the Canadian tuxedos together. And plus, I know he would make me look like 10,000 times better of a wrestler, because that's how good of a wrestler he is.
Whatever. So, Van Landon, as we're ending today's episode, you've been such an engaging guest, man. You are a natural at this. By the way, he did not have any of these questions beforehand. He's been freestyling this the whole time, so kudos to you. Look into 2024 and into the future. What is the future of Van Landon in professional wrestling? What's your goals for this year and beyond?
Expect to see me everywhere. Expect to see me everywhere. Van Landon, let's just say behind the scenes, has made some changes in his life to allow himself to be everywhere a lot more often. So whether it's this weekend, next weekend, or the weekend after, there's probably a wrestling show that Van Landon is wrestling on in or around the Ontario region, across Canada, and who knows, maybe even across the border soon.
Watch out, people. The Van Landon on social media is coming for you. We'll be back next week on Professional Wrestling, the podcast, and we're going to be raising up the testosterone even more. You think between the two of us and the Shih Tzu that the testosterone's flying. Mason Rush, the home of professional wrestling, he's going to be joining us, and we're going to be having a three-way wrestling talk, and we're going to blow the house down. Stay tuned. Professional Wrestling, the podcast.